Did you know that to become an IoT expert, you first need to know how to pilot a submarine? Yep, at least that's what Rob Tiffany did. So, Rob is a worldwide renowned IoT expert, and he's joining me on the IoT Show to share his story, the careers, and the learnings that framed his undeniable expertise in IoT. Hey, this is Olivier. You're watching the IoT Show, and today with Rob, we will talk about what is an IoT expert. And so, Rob, you've been in the IoT business for a very long time. Not that you're old. We're not old. We're not old. We are experienced, right?
Seasoned.
Experienced. So, for those who don't know you, like shame on them to start with, and then who is Rob? Like how was Rob? Well, I'll ask the how and so on. But what is your short introduction about yourself?
My short introduction is, gosh, I'm a. That's a good one. I'm a submarine driver. That's who I am. That's what I am. Yeah, absolutely. Lately I'm working as a chief product officer at a company called Red Bison Networks. So I've been doing product management for a long time with software development on the side. I used to be always just nothing but software development and architecture and stuff like that. And I still love doing that a lot, as do you, I'm sure.
Yep.
I just can't quit. Some people like to do the crossword puzzles on the weekend. I still like writing code. And so
Getting that's your way of getting your hands dirty. That's your old car project, right?
it is. It is. In fact, if I think of just every job or every role, or if I even back at Microsoft when you go do different roles, different organizations, stuff like that,
Mhm.
and stuff where I'm not a developer anymore, and yet I treasured those times I've got to speak at this conference, and so I've got to create a demo, and so it was like the only time I'd have opportunity to write code to build a demo for some kind of conference or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
forcing factor,
it
definitely.
is. Yeah, absolutely. It's good to stay plugged into all that stuff, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, and there's so much happening as well that the risk for me is to stay too high level, like kind of like just hearing about something and not crafting an opinion based on having experienced it or applied it. But the domain is so vast that it's hard to actually keep up with everything. And
Yeah.
but before we get into that, I wanted to rewind a little. You were saying like submarine driver, like how do you go from and to me, that's important because I want to talk with you about what are the main traits of that would define an IT expert. And I think there's something that I've seen a lot among our peers who know IoT is that we're coming from different, from different domains, from different expertise, different areas, and we are able to jump from, or we did, by opportunity or not, jump from one type of job to another one role to another one project to another one. So can we rewind a little and can you tell us a bit more about how do you go from submarine driving in the military to where you're at today?
Wow. All right, let's do it. Um, you know, yes, many years ago, a lifetime ago, I was on a couple of submarines in the U.S. Navy. I was in first submarine was a special ops sub with the Navy SEALs, and so it was doing crazy operations that are all classified, but really exciting and fun. It's good to hang out with SEALs. It's also good if you're in a bar fight in another country. It's good to have those guys around, right?
Useful. Useful.
Yeah, it's useful. Absolutely. But literally, how did I get to the Pacific Northwest and get to meet you and spend time doing startups and be at Microsoft? And it was because of the Navy, actually. Um, you know, we across the bay, the Puget Sound from downtown Seattle, on the other side, there's Bainbridge Island, there's Paulsbo, there's Bremerton. There's a shipyard over there where we decommission all our nuclear submarines at Bremerton Shipyard, ironically. And literally, that's how I got to the Pacific Northwest. Literally, like opening a hatch. I'm here. Um, Seriously. Yeah, I know. It's a weird way to get somewhere, isn't it?
Some
Yeah.
people drove here, some people flew here. Like you submarined here, right?
I submarined here. Well, it's like people talk about, you enjoy visiting Hawaii, right?
Hmm.
I've driven my submarine to Hawaii many, many times. When you come in there and you go around Ford Island and, there's the Arizona Memorial and I'm driving the sub and the captain's like, all right, Tiffany, make sure you don't crash into the Arizona Memorial. That could be a career limiting move. that's that's a no bueno. But yeah, you know what though? But when you think about right then, IoT is a bunch of sensors and actuators, right?
Yep.
And we're just remoting them. It's wireless, wired, whatever. So we know about them somewhere else, right?
Hmm.
That was my first experience of seeing there were sensors all over the place. And of
You
course,
were an operator. You actually were an operator of an IT solution.
yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah.
What do you think sonar is? It's a sensor to
Yeah.
bounce back and tell you where, because we don't have any windows on the submarine, right?
Hmm.
It's like radar for the ocean. You had gas sensors of all kinds. We're having to make oxygen from seawater and separating it and taking oxygen and CO2 and everything. We're breathing CO2. We had CO2 sensors,
Hmm.
radiology, radiation sensors, tons of stuff like that to keep us alive. And a lot of times people take it for granted, or they work in an industrial space and they may not realize they're surrounded by all kinds of sensors and everything that make that whole thing work, and they just take it for granted. And so that's what kept us going on the submarine was lots of sensors and actuators. And so, but yeah, so I got out of the Navy and was in the Pacific Northwest. I'm in Seattle. I started with a startup in Bellevue, Washington called Realtime Data. And literally everyone hears about the dawn of IoT, and it was some vending machine or whatever. That's what we were doing, vending machines. Vending machines a lifetime ago were dumb, unintelligent, fully mechanical,
Hmm.
things turning, whatever, put a quarter in, there's no credit card swiping, there's nothing like that. And we worked with the team that brought a dumb machine to life. And I'd say there's three kind of parts to it. You had the people who were writing firmware, which is your background, and so embedded C on these black boxes, we were burning EPROMs
Hmm.
to get that to work. And so that was kind of like bringing that with cables going into the vending machine to tell you, like there's spirals that spin to push out your candy bars. So that would tell us when that spin, how much money's coming in. Then we had all the wireless guys. We had these RF engineers, some of them who were part of creating the black box for aircraft. I mean, smart
Hmm.
guys. And we invented our own wireless modems, and we're bouncing packets off of these. They're these free, like 450 megahertz business radio towers that you could use publicly. And so we would create our own packets. You learned early on about efficiency. And so we were bit twiddling, X, or, and all that stuff to make our
Yep.
packets as tiny as possible. Because back then, things cost a lot of money to send data, if you can imagine. So it was good to learn early to be efficient instead of
Hmm.
the opposite of that would be, remember when we went into the SOAP XML era of sending
Oh
data,
yeah.
which was the opposite of what you should do.
Agreed. Agreed.
And so yeah, we had to do that. And then I learned Visual Basic on the submarine. I taught myself how to write code and databases, Access, DBase, Paradox, SQL Server, all that stuff, running on Windows 3.1. And so we built the GUI on a desktop PC back then, on a Windows
Hmm.
PC, and it looked like you're looking at a vending machine, and you could see where all the items are, and there's little numbers telling you how many are left in each one, and you know how we always do KPIs: green, yellow, red.
Yeah.
Is it time to restock, right? Or and it's funny. I'm always been a contrarian when it comes to things like predictive maintenance or machine learning in IoT, because somehow we managed to predict failures. So if it's a vending machine that was like a Coke machine or whatever for cold drinks, anything that has a compressor to keep things cold, so you have a
Yep.
motor in there, and the motor can wear down and fail.
Mhm.
Well, we just used the manual from the operator who makes these motors, and we measured RPMs and how many times it was rotating and a lot of stuff like that. We were building, this was Visual Basic and Access databases, and somehow we managed to predict failures of compressors and stuff like that without any fancy machine learning or anything. So there you go, kids.
Well, I would argue that this was already AI. This was like software using data to extract insights, right? That was already AI at the end of the day.
Because, through just different types of mathematics, you can see a trend happening, just like, a trend that ball bearings in a machine are slowly wearing down over time. And based on that progression, I can predict that in 3 weeks, they're going to be small enough that it's going to cause a problem or a failure. So stuff like that. So yeah, we did that, and that's right. And so that's where I learned IoT, and it was really, really hard. And I was a stupid kid, and I was learning from all these gray beard old guys, who's probably me now. And they were so smart, and they taught me everything. And imagine having to invent every part of IoT from scratch to make it work. That's where we were. We didn't have any tools. We just had to make up the whole thing. And there's no way I could have been the guys who were doing embedded C and the EEPROMs and connecting. That was magic. And then guys building wireless modems from scratch. And then we started using mobidems and RAM mobile data. All this stuff would be stuff that BlackBerry would end up using and things like that to send communications. And so, it was crazy. It was just crazy, but it was amazing what we achieved.
That's interesting what you're saying. So you it seems you've been migrating because you seem to be the kind of guy who's interested in learning more, going to the next part, next shiny object, I would say. But we started with being the operator. Then you moved into, how's it done? And let me learn to code and what's next, and learn a lot about the electronics, the sensors, the connectivity. And then you ended up doing some mobile stuff as well, which like smartphones are just yet another IoT device, right?
Absolutely. And so while it seemed like we were super early to the IoT game, and then I would say it just kind of dissipated. I don't want to say IoT or M2M disappeared for a while, but it kind of receded in the background for a while. Because if you think about the 90s, that was also the explosion of wireless mobile operators, cellular networks. That was the beginning of that big boom. In fact, one of our biggest investors for our IoT little vending company was guys from McCaw Cellular, which a lot of people don't know who that is, but Craig McCaw is a pioneer in cellular. He created the first cellular nationwide network. You know that as AT&T now. All these companies that are here, T-Mobile and out, they all came from Western Wireless and VoiceStream and all local Pacific Northwest wireless companies. It's pretty cool, pioneers up here. So that took off, and then the smartphone revolution hit us. And it was way bigger than whatever I was working on before. And arguably, we have not seen anything as big since either than the smartphone tidal wave. No doubt about it. I was a total Microsoft guy. I did the .com thing. I started building, I went from Visual Basic to active server pages and stuff like that, because .com was all about the web, right? And e-commerce. So I was on that train. And then I remember one day on MSDN, there was this emulator that Microsoft had come out. This is like the year 2000, an emulator for something called a Pocket PC. And they had these two different tools. One was embedded C++ and one was embedded VB. And it was all free. And so I downloaded it on my little PC. And I would say the embedded VB was kind of like WinForms, kind of like for a mobile. And so I thought that was so cool. And so I started writing code for this. And then it turns out we had good family friends who was a VP at Compaq. I lived in Houston at this time. And Compaq came out with a Compaq iPac, which a lot of people didn't know. But at the time, it turns out that our friends at HTC were the ODM who created the iPac on behalf of those guys. And they ended up building lots of smartphones and other things. And so I dove into that, started writing code for that, and wrote a book. And I'd written a lot of articles during the 90s. Like I wrote a lot of stuff for Java Developers Journal and other things like that. And I hooked up with A-Press. They were brand new. And they were like, man, this mobile thing might be hot. I don't know. And so this is literally 2000. And so I write one of the first books. And they go, well, don't just do generically about the Pocket PC or whatever. Let's go specific. So there was a little database called Pocket Access.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, so I wrote a book about embedded VB and pocket access on this little iPack. And all of a sudden, the mobile things started to take off. And as you know, you're obviously well involved in that, as you know, and started doing consulting gigs for companies, oil companies. They're like, wow, this is great. Do you remember
Yep.
the time when we had the rugged devices that were barcode scanners?
Oh yeah.
That was the early days, you know, people in a factory or warehouse scanning things, and they had the pocket PC on there.
Yeah. And the
So I
little
found myself,
pen, little
yeah.
pen for writing things, and yep.
And sometimes there was a little cable holding the pen onto the
Yep.
device, like a little eyelet
Exactly.
there. Yeah. So do that. And then a buddy of mine and I, who've done a lot of code together, we created a startup and built a mobile device management company.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if people remember MDM stuff, you know, and so back then, the big players, BlackBerry was the biggest player. They had their BlackBerry Enterprise, because back then BlackBerry, they took over the world for a while,
Yeah.
enterprise handheld devices. And so device management, managing a devices, the security, pushing software to it, that kind of thing. So we built an MDM platform, and it was initially in the early smartphones. I'm sure I've got one of them around here. It was like, I remember it was an iMate, you know, Pocket, you know, remember the early ones of Microsoft, we just called them smartphone. And
Mm-hmm.
and so built an agent in C on there. This was before OMA-DM came out, so it was really hard. So you're doing all the APIs to create the illusion that you know
Yep.
what you're doing. Did that, sold it to a company, had an exit, which is great. And then I joined Microsoft, and it was back then, you know, there was mobile communications business and comm sector were
Mm-hmm.
glued together, and it included embedded, you know, CE, Windows Mobile Phone Edition, blah blah blah, and everything. And so joined Microsoft because I, you know, and as soon as I joined, it was like, hey, we need you to go to Asia and teach all these people how to do all this stuff. And you know, literally, I'm at work my first day at Microsoft, and they probably let me hang out for maybe 2 hours just trying to find my way before they said, so hey, we're going to need you to fly to Kuala Lumpur, and then
Do
you're
you have
going
a
to go.
passport?
Exactly. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they go, yeah, we're going to do this. We got this new mobile devices. We want Cellcom was the mobile operator there. They were kind of the number 2 operator, but they were trying to catch up. And so they were betting on our new Windows mobile smartphones and stuff like that, as well as the rise of web services. And we had this whole
Mm-hmm.
thing like Telco 2.0 and all this stuff. We just made up a bunch of stuff, I think, is what really happened, which we saw that a lot, vaporware. And they're like, so we're going to fly to KL. And they go, and you're going to go pitch. You're going to go be in these meetings with the CEO and everything of Cellcom in those cool Petronas Twin Towers there in Malaysia.
Yeah.
And so I was terrified. And I'm like, well, how do I learn about all this stuff that you're talking about? And they go, we're going to give you a bunch of PowerPoint decks. Just read them on the plane and you'll be good.
Nice.
And so, yeah, you go do that. And then they're like, oh, we need you to go to Bangkok now. And all our partners in Southeast Asia, we need you to do 2 days and you're going to teach them about all this stuff. And so, you know, like you and I found myself, you know, that was kind of got so I'm, oh, wow, I'm speaking in a lot of things now and having to teach people, which I enjoy teaching. I think that's one of the things I enjoy doing the most.
You're a storyteller, so that's definitely is where you are. But actually, so interestingly, your career path has been about, you know, operating something, being curious about it, how it works, getting into the hardware aspects of the sensors and so on, extending that by connecting them. And then you moved into the next wave that was communications, right? And so you've basically, and by the way, that led you to device management, which if you think about it, device management for mobile devices is very similar to an IoT platform in the cloud. Is about connecting and managing devices like sensors and things like that, right? So you basically were at all the steps of the evolution of IoT, and well, lately I've seen you working on digital twins, which is an extension or which heavily relies on the sensors and the data from the sensors to digitalize the environments, the things around you, right? And you're working that as well lately.
Absolutely. After doing Azure IoT at Microsoft, and then I got recruited by Hitachi because they wanted to build an industrial IoT platform. It was
Hmm.
called Lumada, which was a great experience for me to get to build something from scratch, design it, and build the whole thing. But this was the 2016 timeframe, and I was reading early white papers on something called the digital twin. Now about like Dr. Michael Greaves and the guys at NASA who are behind a lot of that stuff. And so, it occurred to me when we built this industrial IoT platform that would live in factories and on bullet trains in Japan, that digital twins probably belong at the heart of the IoT thing, not a bolt-on. I felt like, wow, this is a critical thing. And they're kind of like, I like to think of them as a data structure initially.
Hmm.
It's how you model something. And so, I know we say it's digital, but we're modeling them as a data structure. And
Yeah.
then you have a view of them. A lot of people see a 3D view of something and go like, oh, that's a digital twin. It's like, well, it's a view of the digital twin. Yeah. And so, because before that, we're just saying, well, it's sensor number 123, and it goes to this thing, and here's some
Yeah.
magic happening. And it was better to say, well, actually, that sensor is sending data on behalf of this twin, and the twin is this whole whatever system is. And so, really got into that. And so that was, and the cool thing is, and it was such a great experience working at Hitachi and working for a Japanese company. I spent a lot of time in Japan, spent a lot of time in factories in Japan working with those guys because we had to be legit and real, not another knockoff IoT thing that was for Raspberry Pis or something. And so we came up with the term asset avatars is what we called our digital twins instead of digital twins. Everything in manufacturing, everyone thinks that everything is an asset. And so asset
Yeah.
was a typical name. And then in Japan, and then I've heard from other guys in different parts of Asia that they thought the word avatar actually made more sense for what we were trying to convey than twin did. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
A good parallel to the metaverse environment where it's about having a digital version of you to allow you to interact with the web and other digital versions of people, right? So avatar is representing you. Why not an asset avatar? Yeah,
Right. It was cool.
Like it.
And
Yeah.
So that was a great experience.
All of that is a lot of things, right? And so the title that I put down at the beginning here of our conversation was about what does it take to become an IoT expert, or to be an IoT expert. And I think we got the chance to be here when things were developed. And I think it's at the stage where there are so many things, it's hard to actually really becoming an expert of everything, right? And
that's hard.
The big chance is that if you've not had the chance to go through a career that was about going through all the pieces that, especially if you're young, like, early in career, you might have a good understanding of that end to end, but you don't have the expertise yet. So today, what would be a recommendation for, someone early in career interested about the concepts or the principles, having a good understanding of the end to end, but are there things that you would recommend in terms of, hey, focus more on the cloud side of thing? Maybe digital twins is what is at the core of things, and learn about what is an OS and what is hardware, because there will always be constraints that are impactful on an end-to-end solution. So what are the things that you would say are the 2 to 3 main aspects of IoT that you would recommend someone to really look closer into?
Yeah. No, I agree. Most likely, you're not going to have the opportunity to be an embedded developer and a wireless developer and a cloud developer. And no, you're right. The business outcome is way more important than any of the technology by far. After a while, you start to realize that a lot of that technology that you thought was so important and magical is just plumbing, and it just is. And so, all IoT is I've said this for years: sensors sense and actuators act, and you just connect, you collect data, you analyze it, and you take action on it. Right? There might be other things happening. And so I'd say we've been moving data around from place to place for a long time, but there used to always be a person behind it. And now you've got inanimate objects, right? Which makes things a little trickier for sure. And not everyone's going to be an embedded developer like you, right? And so think it, think of the business outcome that you're trying to accomplish by remotely knowing something is really the key thing. When we
Yep.
say things like, hey, you're just competing against a guy with a clipboard, it's real. Lots of people, and I was guilty of it, and we worked with some of the smartest people in the world, and everyone spent too much time in the weeds with bleeding edge technologies that said you had to know this, and it turns out we were all wrong about
Mhm.
almost everything. It turns out it's just basic stuff. If there's a business case to remotely know something where I don't have to go visit it and inspect it, is there value in that? Yeah, there's value in that. So know the basics of remotely knowing
Yep.
something. Um, the digital twin stuff, it's just a data thing. It's a modeling thing, and you can choose to get into that if you want to or not.
Mhm.
Over time, things that are special, things that will get you a job, will become commonplace and will
Mhm.
become a commodity, and they won't be special anymore. And
Yep.
so we always talk about lifelong learning, right? You can't stop. You just can't stop learning. You're always climbing up that mountain, or you're always pushing that boulder
Yep.
up the mountain. And so you have to keep learning, because what got you the job 10 years ago is not going to get you the job today or even 5 years
Yeah.
ago,
And I
right?
think it's more and more true even beyond IoT itself, as a domain. It's actually true everywhere.
Yeah, it is. It is. Absolutely. So just think of those concepts when you want to know something about a car moving around, or monitoring a machine in a factory, or you're out on a farm and you're trying to
Mhm.
conserve water and you're doing simple stuff.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. I've heard you say that, several times, and I've said it as well. Like, start simple. Think about the business case, like the what is it that you're building that for, right? What's the value you're generating, and bring things to the basics. You need to have moisture sensor deployed on a farm. Maybe you don't need all the fanciness of everything that comes with like full blown IoT solutions. Maybe you just need very simple sensors, communication layer, and maybe a little
yeah,
server on the farm that's and you're good to go, right? And so yeah,
you're right.
sometimes, often, just like the simplest beats and pieces are where to start with.
It's true. In fact, most of the time, the simplest stuff actually will work just fine. You
Yeah.
know, we,
And then the complexity that we see very often comes from the multiple layers that people are trying to add on top, or they're trying to develop or build platforms that can do everything. I
yeah,
have this expression in French to say that this thing can also do coffee, right? If it's a robot
yeah,
arm, why would you need it to do coffee, right? And well, sometimes people
absolutely.
are just thinking about everything and trying to have some generic solution that will solve all the problems, but it actually becomes overcomplicated, hard to secure, hard to deploy, hard to maintain. And this is where the complexity is at.
IoT gets complex enough as soon as you do big deployments. So you better keep it simple as long as you can. We have lots of friends who I can't believe they're still talking about MQTT and why, you know, Spark
You want to
Plug
start?
B
You
is
want
going
to
to.
start that debate now? You
I'm,
really
I'm
want to
gonna
do that?
I'm gonna start stirring the pot right now. But we used to talk about that a million years ago and thought that was the thing. I'm
Yeah.
surprised and there must be newcomers who didn't have this experience, and they just like woke up in the IoT world and they said, oh my God, I better do some kind of Spark Plug B universal namespace MQTT, or I don't have IoT. And nothing could be further from the truth. There's a million wire protocols out there that can move data from one place to another, and file formats, and just move the data. I think it really sank in for me in a big way, being out on the farm and doing agriculture IoT, and what an impact it had on farmers.
Yeah.
And great down to earth people. You've got you're right. You're doing moisture sensors, temperature, humidity, sunlight, things like that. And I'm just using REST APIs. And guess what? I could manage every farm in the entire state of Washington on a single server running under my desk if I needed to, because some of us have done big time server stuff for years, and you know how to
You mean
scale.
you mean in your private cloud?
Yeah, my private cloud. But and also, but like, when we were building Azure IoT Hub, I don't want to say we over engineered it. We just didn't know. And so we built it thinking we better handle 10 million messages per second or we're going to fall over. Well, it
Yeah.
turns out all of IoT around the world so far has yet to create as much data in one day as the New York Stock Exchange. So we all over engineered, we all over did for scale that turns out we never needed. And so you'd be amazed what
or didn't need yet.
We didn't need it yet.
Because actually, before I let you go, I wanted to talk real quick about, or have your opinion real quick about where things are going, right? So the term IoT is maybe fallen in disgrace or whatnot. I don't know. Like lots of companies are trying to not use it because there's a new fancy one, which is AI. And so, but from your perspective, you were mentioning IoT being like plumbing. So is the technology, back to the question at the very beginning, if you want to become an expert, or if you're an expert, is it a domain that is long living, that you have a future as an expert in that domain or not? What is your perspective on that?
I guess we still need plumbers in case something happens at your house with the sink. To your point about we're making things too complex on what we think of as an IoT system or platform or whatever, if you just reduce it down and just say IoT is just the plumbing, I'm just getting data off this device and I'm capturing it and storing it. The stuff that happens after that, that's something else. That's not IoT. That's analytics, or it's AI, or you're modeling things as a twin, but that's something else. And let's all say that. We used to think everybody's been building these platforms that do a million things, and you shouldn't have to know how to do all that. To your point, though, the IoT plumbing is getting so easy, but it's not going to go away because you still have to have it. It just becomes, like we talk about technology, how it fades into the background when it goes mainstream. I think IoT is the same way. You don't get AI without tons of data, because AI happens from training models. And the only way you're going to have smart AI about all these different scenarios in your business or whatever is you better have that IoT plumbing sending that data into your system. Those digital twins of whatever system you're monitoring, there's the latest state, and then every packet that comes in is the historical state. Well, what do you think you're doing there? You're training, you've got a model of this thing, and you run it through ML and you keep adding to it. It's the same thing as training ML models, or as people like to say, AI these days. And so you've got to have it. But I would say keep going up the stack if you can. Maybe spend more time on the data side. Businesses, when we used to say, well, you're going to get everybody's saying data is the new oil. Well, it's not. I know so many people that go, we have so much data, we don't know what to do with it. We did a great job. You told us to capture the data, and now we have a pile of data.
Yeah, great. And actually, the gold in that big stack of data is the insights you can extract, right? It's the automation of insight extraction through AI, through machine learning models applied, and I think to the data coming from the environments, right?
You said the word right in your sentence, because we would say deriving insights, and so you're going to make these great decisions. The word is automation. If you ask executives all over the planet, if you go to the World Economic Forum in Davos and they say, what's the number one thing every executive wants? They say they want automation. And so nobody wants to work in a factory anymore. No one wants to work in a farm anymore. We lost 300,000 nurses during COVID. It's crazy. We have labor shortages all over the place, and they need data and automation to pick up the slack. It's not even about replacing jobs. There's just not enough people. So they need things like IoT, analytics, AI to augment or fill in the gaps where they used to have people. And the word is automation. And so taking that action. And so it's not even a guy sitting at the desk analyzing the data and go, I think I'm going to do this with this insight. It's like, do the thing. In fact, I had tons of customers that are like, we're tired of paying this expensive bill for this IoT platform, because what we want it, don't tell me what to do. I want you to do it. Do the thing. Go end to end. Complete the action for me.
Cool, Rob. Yeah, that's definitely, if we're to try and sum up everything we just said in like 30 something minutes, it's supposed to be a 10-15 minutes conversation, but I think people will enjoy that one. That's fine. I can publish it like by 2 in speed, and people will still be interested in that one. But I think IoT Expert is really about understanding the use cases, being focused on the outcome, being curious about the various aspects and the various technologies involved. Very often you were saying, about your work with farmers, being interested in the operators, the people who are going to use it, because that's understanding what they want. Because at the end of the day, your IoT solution system application will be useless if it's not serving someone's purpose, right? And if it's not the
Absolutely.
operator needs to be able to use it, right? And extract value from it. And I think this is really a domain where if you need to have this kind of like general culture, you need to be a generalist to be really good at it, and have experienced lots of things. Getting your hands dirty.
It's good to have, and being a generalist over time, you might be an expert in all these different points, but if you want to have a real business or you really want to sell these things that we're talking about, you've got to be able to talk the talk to the customer who, what is the problem it's solving? And remember, it can't be a nice to have. What is the urgent, very important problem you're going to solve with this technology?
Mm-hmm.
That's how you do it. And so you've got to know a lot about business, and you got to know about commerce and things like that. Yeah. Takes a while.
Well, Rob, thanks for coming on this IoT Show episode, one of the first ones of this reboot of the show. I'm sure we're going to see you again. You'll be around.
Excellent. My pleasure. It's great being with you.
Cool. Talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone, for watching.